right, welcome to the February 11th, 2026 meeting of the Redmond Planning Commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll start with a roll call. Commissioner Aparna.
Present.
Commissioner Copley.
Present.
Commissioner Coleman.
Present.
Commissioner Gagne.
Present. Present.
Commissioner Van Nyman.
Present.
Vice Chair Whittier.
Present.
And I am Chair Weston. I'd like to thank the following staff for being present tonight: Jeff Churchill, Glenn Coyle, Lauren Alpert, Kim Dietz, and Chris Wyatt. I look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, that's approved. And any corrections to the meeting summary from last time? All right, then I look for a motion to approve the meeting summary from January 14th, 2026.
So moved. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, that's also approved. It's now time for us to hear public comment and items from the audience. Glenn, who do we have tonight?
We have 3 people signed up. The first is David Morton.
All right, and just a reminder to please keep your comments to 3 minutes and to start with your name and address.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm David Morton, Redmond, 98053. I'd like to discuss a critical land use issue that affects Redmond's drinking water aquifer and may cause PFAS contamination in wells 1 and 2. Last week, I testified before City Council about PFOS levels exceeding EPA's 4 parts per trillion standard in these wells. Tonight, I want to focus on the land use aspect of this problem, specifically the Evans Creek relocation project and the DTG recycle site, formerly All Wood Recycling. The DTG site sits within Redmond's Critical Aquifer Recharge Area 1, or CARA 1, where groundwater contamination can reach municipal supply wells in under 5 years. In August 2013, a massive fire at Allwood Recycling required multi-day firefighting efforts. A former Redmond Natural Resources manager informed the City Council that firefighting foam was used to extinguish that blaze and that about 1,900 fish in Evans Creek were killed. The concern is straightforward. The foam likely contained PFAS, and those forever chemicals may have infiltrated Redmond's aquifer. Bob Yoder's research suggests additional historic contamination sources at this industrial site: oil spills into Evans Creek, failing detention ponds, and septic systems that may have channeled PFAS-contaminated water underground. Here's the land use policy problem. The Evans Creek relocation project will disturb soil on the DTG property. When the Department of Ecology sampled soil there in 2022, they did not test for PFAS. This is a significant gap in the environmental review process, especially given the site's MTCA contaminated cleanup status and location in Redmond's CARA 1. Since the Planning Commission advises the Mayor and City Council on land use policies, I urge you to recommend that the city require PFAS testing at the DTG site before any ground disturbance occurs. Identifying and remediating contamination sources is essential to prevent ongoing pollution of Redmond's drinking water. With a 2029 EPA compliance deadline and costs for treatment of wells 1 and 2 potentially in the tens of millions, Redmond cannot afford to overlook potential contamination sources in its CARAs. Sound land use policy demands testing before digging. I ask that you advise Council to strengthen Redmond's critical area protections by requiring PFAS assessment before approving projects in CARA zones, particularly on properties with known environmental violations or firefighting foam use. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Andrew Connolly.
Great. If you could start with your name and address, please, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, yeah, so my name is Andrew Kennelly, Kennelly, and I live at 15618 Northeast 95th Way in Redmond. And I guess I'll begin, first of all, just thank you to the commissioners for all that you do. I don't follow your work terribly closely, but I just appreciate that the effort that's involved and the time commitment involved in doing the kind of work that you do. The reason I'm here is it is my understanding from looking at the agenda that the commission is looking at fencing, particularly looking at safety issues involving fencing with an eye towards fence height and fence materials and other aspects of fencing. I live in a HOA community called Windwood that has about 250 feet of frontage with the Sammamish River Trail on the east side of the river. Our fence, it would not surprise me if the recommendations that you make and the policies that might eventually be approved would call our fence into question with respect to some of the criteria that you might be looking at. I would say the same thing is probably true of many, many fences that you will find all up and down the Sammamish River. So it'd just be my request that in the event that our fence were considered a safety problem, that we would be allowed to, remedy or repair or replace that fence, because the truth of the matter is that fences within 150 feet of the river are technically all illegal. It's our understanding that our fence is considered legally non-conformant because it was constructed prior to when those rules went into effect. But that situation sort of leaves us stuck in a situation where in an attempt to improve our fence might be deemed in violation of those regulations that prevent fencing within 150 feet of the river. So that would just be my request or my ask, is that there be some sensitivity given to existing fences that are out of compliance, and that there might be kind of a conundrum involved if fence owners wish to bring their fences into compliance with whatever new policies might be put into effect. So that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next up is Andrew Brown.
Hello, I'm Andrew Brown, 15602 Northeast 95th Way, Redmond. A familiar address because I live 2 doors down from Andrew Kennelly. I want to reiterate what Andrew said and just thank you all for being such great stewards of Redmond and our environment. I really appreciate that. I want to restate what Andrew said, is that our fence is probably 50 or more years old, and we are trying to do some repairs to it, which is taking us down a bit of a rabbit hole. I think clear direction is needed to those with legacy fences that were here way before, probably before some folks in this room were even born, and how to deal with that and how we can repair those fences in a way that, quote, doesn't increase the nonconformity. We want to reduce the nonconformity, but at the same time allows us to build a fence that provides for privacy, especially as we see much significantly increased traffic along the Sammamish River Trail. So that's part one of my comments. The other parts are actually to do with light pollution and illegal tree removal, which also I think falls under your guidance. There was some illegal tree removal along sensitive areas in the light industrial park just across the river from our area. It has been processed by the planners. Your team did a great job, but the penalties that came down to the guilty parties were a warning. These folks knowingly, in my mind, cut down 30 or 40-year-old trees, which can't be replaced by putting in a little, 3-foot-high sapling. And so it's taken away sensitive environment. It's also taken away a barrier between homeowners and the buildings across the street. That leads to my final point, which is, will you please give some consideration to light pollution from businesses, especially in sensitive areas, such as along the Sammamish River Trail. Every time a tree comes down, all of a sudden the light that was hidden behind that tree is exposed to everybody. It's exposed to the animals that don't like to have light at night. They like darkness at night. We as human beings, we also like to have darkness at night when we're trying to sleep, and we don't want searchlights from across the river shining into our homes. I think it's really important that the city looks at the light pollution issues as part of the overall Redmond 2050 plans, along with your the tree canopy and other such things. So those would be my requests of the committee. And as a citizen, I'm happy to be engaged and help in any way. You've got my email address now. We're not radical in our association, but we do care greatly. We live on the river. We care greatly about the environment. Right across the river, there's a light industrial park. That's fine. But when they go and start cutting down trees and doing other things, that starts to step into areas that I think we all feel very passionate about. So, thank you.
Thank you for being here. All right, that's our public comment for tonight. At this point, we're going to conclude our work on the land use and zoning map amendments, bringing up Glenn Coyle, who's already here.
Yeah, the item here is just to approve the report. So,
All right, so the report was published in our packet. Are there any corrections or concerns to the material that was published? No. Okay, in that case, I look for a motion to approve the report for City Council on the land use and zoning map amendments.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, that is approved. Thank you for the work. And then next up, our main event tonight is the study session on our 2026 Code Amendment Series, including business improvement, fences, and legislative conformance, and bringing up Lauren Alpert and Kim Dietz, and also possibly Jeff Churchill.
Good evening. Thank you, Commissioners. I'm just loading the presentation in Teams.
I think you're not getting picked up by the mic.
I don't think I am either.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. So welcome to the 2026 Code Amendment Series, Business Improvements, Fences, and our 2025 Legislative Conformance. We're going to start with the business improvement package, and we'll talk about fences and the legal nonconformance. And this is in preparation for the February 25th public hearing. So we have it's a hodgepodge package, a series of code amendments to be completed now in the end of 26. It's part of our regular upkeep of the Redmond zoning code. And this is going to be our first review of these three packages. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim Dietz to discuss the Economic Development and Business Improvement Package.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Kimberly Dietz with Economic Development, part of Planning and Community Development. I'm here tonight to present to you four portions of amendments that we have been developing that represent improvements for business support throughout the city. And the first one is to clarify requirements for commercial floor area in mixed-use developments. We want to include an amendment that would recognize that a requirement for commercial floor area, when required, is not allowed to be requested for deviation. There are certain things that you can request for deviation in a project for new development, but we want to clarify that this would not be included. This requirement would not be allowed. The second one is a sort of a design kind of component, and this would be a businesses open sign that would become part of what we call a traffic control plan. A traffic control plan is provided to the city for review and approval when a project or any type of activity is proposing to close the sidewalks and or streets. And in the event that they are doing so in a place where a business is typically accessed, we want to make sure that pedestrians have ample opportunity to know how to still get to that business, that the business is in fact open, and if you walk this way versus this way, you will still be able to safely get to that business. We saw this a little bit last year during our December shopping promotion from Economic Development, and we created some of those signs in order to direct pedestrians. We'll use the same sign design, and we would ask that those applicants who are proposing the traffic control plan develop the sign using our template and then include that in their plan as well as the location where they would be sited. The third one is regarding food trucks and pop-up retail courts as well as the publicly accessible enhanced amenity spaces, or called Ps. What we want to do in this amendment is to increase the clarity regarding its process. We want to call out that when these types of land uses are created, they will go under a type 2 review process with our current planners, and that is something called site plan entitlement. During that process, the applicant will define the types of uses that would be allowed in the retail court area. For example, they might plan for trucks, they might plan for some kiosks, they might plan a band stage for entertainment. If they lay that all out during the site plan entitlement in their application, then when the court is developed, they would not need to obtain additional permits when those uses wanted to activate in subsequent years. Okay, so it just clarifies what that process looks like. And then finally, there are some definitions. We use something called allowed uses to indicate where certain types of businesses and business activities can exist in the city in our zoning districts. And sometimes those definitions of that business or that business activity is not entirely clear, so we're introducing some clarifications to several of those definitions. Thank you.
And I'm thinking we'll just hold questions until the end, and then we can start a matrix at that point.
Sounds good.
Great.
All right, so the next is fences. So this is an update in chapter 2124. And the outcome that we were looking for this is increased in clarity for applicants, consistency throughout the code about fences, some improved workflow for staff, and aligning with our Redmond 2050 goals. So the results to reach those outcomes, we've updated the purpose statement to better align with Redmond 2050. We also consolidated the additional neighborhood requirements in the code to apply across our centers and our residential zones. And for that clarity, we updated some of the figures that were in the code regarding fence height. We also created a new section specifically for retaining walls, 2125. So this new section moves some of the text that was in Appendix 2, and it was edited for additional clarity. And we added some additional diagrams for that increased clarity as well. And we put a placeholder in the code for terrace retaining walls that could be a potential design alternative. And next, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Churchill for our legislative conformance scope.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners, and nice to be with you remotely this evening. In 2025, the state legislature was busy, and several of the laws that were passed by the legislature in 2025 require action on the part of the city so that our development regulations can continue to be compliant with state law. And so this is a list of, I think there are 7 here on the page, and we're going to go through each of these individually, but this just gives you a sense of what some of the topics were. So Lauren, could you take this to the next slide? Thanks. So let's start with House Bill 1757, residential conversions. A lot of these are housing related bills with a purpose of facilitating the production of more housing in the state. This one in particular facilitates conversions from non-residential buildings to residential use. And it puts some limits on what cities can require as part of the permits for those conversions. This is an add-on to a law that was passed a couple of years ago that applied in certain zones, and now it applies in residential zones in addition to commercial and mixed-use zones where it already applied. So much of the text for this law already exists in our code. Next slide. House Bill 1096 has to do with lot splitting. Lot splitting is a brand new way to create two lots out of one in Washington state. You can think about it like a mini short plat. The idea was just to make it easier for property owners with one parcel to create two out of the one for infill housing. There are some requirements in the law about what cities can and can't do during the lot splitting process. Mainly geared toward making sure that this remains a streamlined administrative process. Next, Senate Bill 5559 has to do with unit lot subdivision, and there's going to be a picture on the next slide of what a unit lot subdivision is. But again, this is about building more housing. A unit lot subdivision is one of many ways to subdivide property. What 5559 did was add some parameters about what it is and how it works in state law, so it's a little more structured than it used to be. Redmond already had a unit lot subdivision provisions. The main change in Redmond is that now unit lot subdivisions can be used to subdivide where there are going to be detached housing units in addition to attached, which was already allowed. Okay, so now we're ready for the graphic. So a unit lot subdivision works by, normally in a subdivision, you take land and you propose to subdivide it, and there are requirements for every lot, for setbacks, for lot size, for this dimension and that dimension. In a unit lot subdivision, it's a little bit different, and the way that it's different is that those dimensional requirements are measured from what's called the parent lot, so the bigger one. And on the slide here is just 4 examples of how a unit lot subdivision could work. Any of these could be unit lot subdivisions that could occur in Redmond, but these examples are from a state document. And so you can see that the measurements for setbacks, for lot coverage, for any lot-based standard would be measured on the basis of the parent lot. And as long as these standards are met at the parent lot level, then it's compliant. And then you can subdivide the land. The individual, here they're called unit lots, sometimes they're called child lots. Those lots might not have setbacks or lot coverage or impervious surface area conditions that meet code requirements for lots, but because they're based on a unit lot subdivision where the parent lot met it, then it's okay. And again, this already exists in the Redmond zoning code. What is changing in the zoning code is making this available for detached units, like example 2, that's just a cottage court. And so it makes it possible to create a different kind of ownership model for some of these housing types. Okay, next slide. 5509 was zoning for childcare facilities. This is about making more childcare facilities available in the state. It requires cities to permit childcare facilities outright in most zones. In Redmond, that means removing the conditional use permit and certain development requirements for some of the zones where childcare facilities were currently allowed, but only as conditional uses. The next slide. Okay, so there were 2 bills in 2025 that dealt, at least in part, with parking. The main impetus is to reduce the cost of building housing, and it limits what cities and other local jurisdictions can do with respect to requiring off-street parking. So for Redmond, what we need to do is eliminate off-street parking requirements and there's a long list of things, and these are the combination of the 2 bills. These are the things that they talked about: retirement residences, daycare centers, single-family homes or middle housing that are under 1,200 square feet, affordable housing, senior housing, the ground level non-residential space in a mixed-use building, a passive house, modular construction, and mass timber construction. So these are the types of housing and non-housing space that the state has, for which the state has preempted off-street parking regulations. Okay, next slide. 5611. The title is about permit timelines. As we read through it, we concluded that Redmond's code is already compliant with state-mandated timeline-related provisions. There is some text in that bill unrelated to timelines about binding site plans, which is another way to subdivide land. And what it says is that you can use a binding site plan for subdivision related to multifamily residential use. So that's a change that we'll need to make in our code. We don't see a lot of subdivisions related to multifamily. Those are often built on lots that are not subdivided, but it's a provision that we need to include. Okay, next. So those are all of those. We do not have discretion on those. The state legislature set parameters, and we need to be within those parameters. The next set, these are cleanups, and they're not related to what there's some relationship to state law, but these are mainly post-Redmond 2050 cleanups, things that we've found as staff or customers have found in the zoning code that need to be cleaned up. And I think there's just one slide on these, so I'll talk about them just on this slide. One that is related to state laws, the first one. The state, a number of years ago, made it possible for cities to have final plat approvals via an administrative process, instead of having the council go through the final plat approval process. These have never come to the planning commission, so if you're asking yourself, what is a final plat approval? This is when a developer decides they're going to subdivide land, they get their preliminary plat approval, and then they go build all the improvements. They build the streets, they put in the utilities. If they have other infrastructure, they're adding that. And at the end of that process, in the code, it says an engineer is designated to ensure that what they built is what they were required to build. And that's the final plat approval. Currently, the council kind of affirms that through a council meeting and a vote. But the state does allow that to be administrative. And it's very much an administrative task. And many cities have gone this route. And we believe that would also be a good idea in Redmond. It's not perhaps the best use of the council's time, because it is something where you're comparing what was required and what was built. Second one here. Sorry, Lauren, we're going to spend a lot of time on this slide. There's a footnote that's missing in the neighborhood residential zone about garage setbacks. And so we would like to put that back where it belongs. And the effect of that would be to make sure that driveways are always long enough for cars and they're not overhanging sidewalks, or that the cars are not overhanging sidewalks. A third is that there's a simple math error in the explanatory text for maximum building height. It doesn't change the substance of the requirement because it's in the explanatory text, but we do want the math to be correct. In the transfer of development rights chapter, there are some provisions related to an affordable housing unit bonus that no longer exists that we'd like to take out so that it's not confusing. In the code, there are conflicting provisions about whether accessory dwelling units can be used to satisfy affordability requirements. The answer should be yes, and so we want to make the code consistent in that regard. And on the right-hand side of the page, public administration uses are typical government uses, and we have the Manufacturing and Operations Center in the manufacturing park zone, and we just want to make sure that that and any other future public administration uses are allowed in that zone clearly and explicitly. There are open space requirements that should have been carried over as part of Redmond 2050 for the neighborhood residential and the neighborhood multifamily zone. They appear in the open space chapter, but they don't appear in the zone chapter for those zones. So we want to make that correction. It's a similar situation with the minimum lot size. When the tables were brought over into the new format for the zoning code in Redmond 2050, the minimum lot size row did not come over for whatever reason, so we want to add that back. we would like to clarify some co-living provisions in the neighborhood residential zone to close some loopholes that would be interesting, but to make sure that co-living, if it's happened in the neighborhood residential zone, is indeed actual co-living housing. Let's see, two more. The Overlake incentive program came first, and it didn't have the point values codified. All the rest of them do. So we'd like to bring that into the code, just like for every other zone for the incentive program. And then also related to Overlake, there are regulations about minimum building height, and we would like to amend the code to clarify that that does not apply to accessory structures, which are often short accessory buildings. And then finally, there are some corrections and clarifications to land use table notes in 2104. Okay, that was a lot. What's next, Lauren?
Great job,
I
Jeff.
think I'm turning it back over to you.
Yeah. So we did put this out on Let's Connect, the city's public feedback website. And we did receive some feedback on retail fences, parking, some of the conversions, and the lot splitting. So this is just a sample of what we heard. That was around November, December, this winter, that we received that feedback. In January, we refined the drafts. We're here at Planning Commission February and March, with anticipated going to Council April and May. And in relation to your review schedule, tonight is your introduction. We have the public hearing scheduled for February 25th. March 11th, we'll have another study session and potential recommendation to to City Council. And then in the spring, Q2, we'll be going to Council review and action. And I can pull up the issue matrix, and we can get started on questions and comments. And I did already put the public comment around fences into the issue matrix.
Thank you. And just to cover that one, I know the Sammamish River Trail isn't technically Redmond, so we don't own the requirements on like whether or not the fences are legal there. Is that correct?
I'll address that in the issue matrix. I'm not
That'd be
really
great.
sure. My understanding, it would still be a legal non-conforming fence.
No, not right now. Thank you.
But yeah, we'll put that all in the issue matrix.
We'll follow up. All right. Does anyone want to kick things off either by clarifying pieces that you would like to see in the public comment fence issue or by adding additional questions or comments? Commissioner Coleman.
I just make comment on the fences, the two comments we had on the fences this evening around legacy. It sounds like what I heard was like a catch-22 situation where I don't know the details whether the fences being in King County or Redmond, but it feels like there's a catch-22 situation of a fence that isn't safe, but you can't replace it with something else because it's not in code already. So I think that's something that just needs to be addressed alongside obviously a lot of the other kind of comments that have come back from public comment. So.
Separate fences issue while other people are gathering their thoughts. I had a question about, there was an exclusion of barbed wire and razor wire, which are allowed in certain fence types, but I was hoping we could also exclude those like top of the fence treatments along parks and trails. Just because I think the goal here is that there's still privacy for industrial or like business purposes, that there's like a safety component to that, but we don't want people getting hurt. So there was an exclusion if they back up to, for example, a residential lot. I think that should also be in public spaces, especially ones where you would have children.
Okay, I'll add that.
Great. Other comments? Commissioner Coleman.
I just want to plus one on what you just said. about razor wire and things like that.
Yep.
The other thing is what that constitutes in terms of what type of fence is that? Like, what is it intended for? Like, obviously, if it's for industrial and it's like, 10 feet high, trying to stop people climb over a fence, that's a different thing from being, 3-4 foot high or less than that with barbed wire on the top. I'm sure there's probably a number of different places in Redmond where that already exists. So how we think about retrospectively, again, those places where that might need to be changed. That's the retrospective movement of that kind of barbed wire fencing that's already there that then is non-compliant, like what we heard originally. There's probably other places in Redmond that's the case.
All right, so continuing to address I don't think anyone's going out and like ticketing a fence for being wrong. It's just when you come to rebuild it, then it has to meet the code as it is written.
Yeah, so how to
Now.
address legal non-conforming fences that are maybe abutting public spaces that have kind of that barbed wire or electric.
Yep, sounds good.
I mean, or if there's fences like that just happen to be in some neighborhood because it got put up there in 1950s or something and no one's addressed it, yeah, it seems dangerous. It seems like that could be an exception to the rule, and that's an exception that might come up as well. Versus being on a public space, could be in someone's backyard or whatever, because there was nothing else around here at that point in time. So
Yeah, so in general, you wouldn't see fence, like there's a specific thing where you can have barbed wire or the razor wire. I just wanted it expanded.
yeah, I'm saying something slightly different, which if someone's put up in a residential area, in the 50s when there was like nothing but a few cows in a field, that'd be slightly different. And I think you may see some of those things in some places in Redmond that we need to kind of make sure that we can address if people want to change it.
Right.
So,
Janine, or sorry, I said that totally wrong. Vice Chair Woodyer. Yes, I was letting that wrap. Commissioner Aparna.
This might be a really silly question, but I was wondering about the overlake incentive table, which is, so we went through a lot of work on that, and from what I understand, it's part of the Redmond 2050, but currently it's not part of the regulations and it's going to be formalized. Is that correct, or is something changing?
It's a little bit different. That's a good question, Commissioner Parna. Thanks for the opportunity to clarify. It's in the code. It can be used. The point values, what they equate to in terms of FAR and height, are in the calculator, but they did not get codified. But they got codified for every other zone. So we want to make that the same, just so we're transparent and people can use that information.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gagne.
This one doesn't need to be in the matrix. It's just to help me understand something. On the what we've heard slide, I don't know what appropriate sightlines means in terms of parking, so I'd love to hear what that feedback was from the community.
My recollection, Commissioner Gagne, is that feedback is that when there is activity with a lot of cars that are attracted to it, that the person who was commenting was looking to make sure the city was enforcing appropriate sightlines for safety.
What that means? Sorry, like sightline in your rearview mirror?
Like making sure if you're,
Go ahead.
if you're in a parking lot, making sure you're not putting like large trees or bushes that would obstruct your view of like coming around a corner or looking at seeing pedestrians. I think that's the example that the public comment used.
Ask a follow-up to this. Is there a place, I know you guys have shown me before, but I can't navigate to it myself, where we can access what all of the public comments were when you guys sought this feedback? I'm also interested in the lot splitting, like what the community feedback was or the questions that they had and comments about lot splits and other subdivisions.
I actually don't know if we published all the public comments that we have, but we
I
can.
don't think they're currently published, but we could put them in the next packet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to see those. Thank you.
Comments.
Sorry, I was thinking if we had posted it yet, but we hadn't, so.
Commissioner Copley.
I don't know whether this falls into the category of code cleanup or additions. But one comment we heard today suggested that the commission could act in an advisory capacity to the council about requiring a PFAS assessment. So I don't know if that is something that goes into code at all. I don't think it does. But I'm unsure if we have a place in the agenda where we could bring that up, or if it would make more sense to just.
Let's discuss that during, maybe the commissioner talked to him at just the
Yeah, I would
very
say
end.
the commissioner discussion.
Yep.
provide
At the
Or
end.
a separate letter.
discussion on that.
Yep, I think that's great.
Sounds good.
Okay. An additional comment on this one for the matrix. I would love to understand the rationale for not allowing daycares closer than 300 feet together. That was one of the only old requirements that wasn't struck, and I couldn't come up with a rationale other than maybe parking that made sense. But it seems like actually in a neighborhood, it would be nice to have, or there's no reason to forbid it.
I'll need to look back and make sure that it hasn't been struck. What we tried to do when we looked at the regulations that we had in place is to see if any of those were covered by the state Department of Children and Youth and Family Services. So let me look back at that, and we'll address it in the issues matrix.
Okay, and just for the record, my preference would be that it was, like, that we don't have a density of childcare
Okay,
limitation in any way, that we just remove that line.
okay, thank you.
Commissioner Coleman?
I have a comment on that. I mean, if you took it to its extreme, you could have 5 houses that are doing childcare in the morning. Now, we happen to have a couple near us, and it's fine. But there's a lot of traffic that comes through right now, even with that. So if you, in those situations, you actually removed that, I think that could be problematic for people who are living around there. There's a lot of car traffic that happens in the morning at exactly the same time with things like drop-off. So you had a number of houses doing that. That is more like you're in a business environment than you are actually in a residential environment. So I'd question that a little bit. So.
Okay. Further discussion on that point? All right, different points. Commissioner Copley.
I was curious about the co-living cleanup. So I know Jeff had brought up that there was some ambiguity around the co-living requirements, and I wanted to hear more about that if I could.
Do you want that now or for the matrix?
I think now would be great, but matrix is fine too.
Do you have specific questions?
I don't understand what the ambiguity is about. Jeff alluded to the fact that there could be some unintended uses, I think. So I'd like to hear more about that.
Sure, I'd be happy to cover it in summary, and I'm going to be referring to page 72 of the technical committee report. But what it has to do with mainly is ensuring that co-living, also called residential suites in the code, are complying with affordable housing regulations as intended, and that they're not, and that an applicant is not saying that there is co-living happening just as a way of, and also making sure that an applicant is saying that co-living is happening just as a way of circumventing maximum square footage per lot regulations. And so the way that is proposed to happen is that there would be an additional footnote in the development standards table dealing with dormitories and residential suites or co-living, saying that they're not regulated by maximum dwelling units per lot metrics, but they do need to comply with other development standards like the building height, maximum impervious surface area, etc. And that they would need to be at least 6 residential suites in a development, so that it's fully residential suites are fully co-living, and not perhaps someone creating one co-living unit for the purpose of circumventing an affordable housing regulation, or circumventing, more to the point, the maximum square footage regulation, but then never really using it as co-living.
Really helpful. Thank you.
question about the parking. I know this one comes from the state, but I'm wondering if we could be maybe a little bit more specific. There's a section where it's talking about alternative minimums. Ugh, that's a tongue twister. Alternative minimums that are allowed if an applicant has a parking study prepared by a qualified expert. And I don't know what a qualified expert is. Is that a lawyer? Is that a zoning code expert? Is that a civil engineer? Like what kind of expert?
Qualified expert for a parking study. There are transportation engineering firms that will do them. There are also bespoke parking consulting firms that will do them. And we would ask typically through the development review process that they share their credentials in terms of their experience and knowledge in doing the work.
Okay. I think the thing that I know that, again, this is a state requirement, but the thing that I'm hoping to avoid is I'm very happy in general with the direction that Redmond is going to reduce the parking requirements, especially surface parking requirements. But we've done so much in the last few years and it hasn't actually built in yet. And so it makes me a little bit leery when there's an alternative minimum path. I don't know if we're allowed to specify what the parking expert is or anything specific around that, or if it's better not to, and we can just see if it turns into a problem. But this jumped out at me.
So the alternative minimum parking arrangement is not new. That goes back many years. And I would say in our experience, we haven't had trouble distinguishing who is and who is not qualified to conduct a parking study. And our expectation is that with the changes to parking regulations that have been made, both with a local impetus and then because of state preemption, the use of the alternative parking requirements is going to go down. Continue to go down because the minimums are lower or no longer exist. There's less and less use for that paragraph.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Other questions or comments for the matrix? All right, I have one last one that's, it's sort of long. And so if it's better for me to send by email, I can. But what I was really looking at is when we were getting into the uses, I think this is such a good project to be able to say what kind of business uses are available in different spaces. However, the way that it was rewritten, I just had so many questions. And so I'm just going to run through some of the examples that was coming. I was just thinking of both businesses that I liked today in Redmond, and then also ones in surrounding communities that I wish we had in Redmond, or I've heard interest in. And so just questions on that front. The first is, do religious uses fall under arts, entertainment, recreation, assembly, or is that is that covered by something else? I would also ask if nonprofits fall under arts, entertainment, recreation, assembly, or if that's a separate use. Question, where would something like cooking classes fall? And I think that can be different depending if it's offered by a nonprofit or if it's offered by a retail kitchen store. Things like indoor or outdoor mini golf. What if they sell alcohol? What if they sell food? Things like arena soccer, things like a dance school that also sells equipment in a store on site. Things like adult-only recreation like axe throwing. So those are all things, I think those are all covered under arts, entertainment, recreation, and assembly, but it still seemed very hazy to me reading that. I was reading between lines a lot. I wasn't clear if alcohol was covered under general sales and services or if it's only cannabis that was in the exclusion. I wasn't clear if there are any medical services that aren't covered by general sales and services, so that including either surgery or equipment like x-rays or MRIs, or if there are any other like chemical storage or that sort of thing on site that would bump it out of that tier. And then final big question is, do animals impact these use cases? So could you have an animal shelter, a vet, puppy training classes, a doggy daycare, or a cat cafe? So anyway, those are just top of the head things where I was like, I still don't know if these are allowed.
Thank you. These are wonderful questions, and these are very common questions as well. And that's why we always strive to improve our definitions. I am going to enjoy looking into these so I can map each one for you. But just in general, we use something called the land-based classification system, and it's a grouping that allows like general sales service to then have a definition describing what it's including, and what sometimes also what it's not including. And by using those, we built some flexibility into the code. So, maybe a specific use isn't called out, but similar types of uses are called out, and therefore, a specific use would be in that. But sometimes it does get challenging when you can't find, a very innovative category like axe throwing. So I will look forward to placing all of these in the issue matrix. Okay. And then I'll also provide a link to it's LBCS, Land-Based Classification System, so you could see how that then maps out also. And then another tool that we use to try to understand uses is when a business is applying for a business license, and then working with our Development Services Center, is that they have something called a NAICS code, N-A-I-C-S code. It's a standard term, or code rather, used across the whole U.S., and it allows them to classify what their business is actually doing. Because sometimes the business name or the business description, it's still unclear, but that NAICS code really helps us understand what they're doing and then understand also where they would fit within the community. So I'll send a link to all of that information.
Great, thank you so much for the help. Are there any last
I'd like
questions? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Chair Weston. I just want to point out, I put in the chat, and just for the community to know as well, we always encourage people asking questions about uses, and definitely the planners at the counter are also using what we call the business use lookup tool. And it's questions like the ones you were asking, Commissioner Weston, that help us improve the tool, because we'll add more and more uses, things that people can think of, and map those to uses that are in the zoning code. So I would encourage anyone to go take a look at it. It's a nice resource for people opening businesses in Redmond.
Amazing, thank you. All right, Commissioner Parna.
Jeff, I really like the diagram on the subdivision as per state law, the new one, which we're going to comply with. Is there a way to extend that diagram to show the other ways a lot can be split along the same lines? Like this is one, then what are the other options that we've heard? If there's an ADU, can we diagrammatically have like a visual guide to this? Because it feels like we have options. Residents have options in the city if they have a big lot. But it feels like now there are so many options. So, I'm just wondering if there can be a guide or at least description in the issue matrix.
For sure, I can do a description. I'll look to see if there maybe already is a guide that someone has put together. The unit lot subdivision was from the Department of Commerce, but is specifically on their unit lot subdivision handout, and so they don't have the other kinds of subdivision. Getting that graphically put together might not be feasible for the matrix, but certainly a short description would be feasible.
Yeah, thank you. That would be nice, because eventually I think that should translate to a graphic guide. Maybe not for the matrix, but it would be very useful for folks to understand, hey, these are possibilities, right? So that would be great. Thank you.
All right, everyone, thank you for this. So we will be back next time with our public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So last item for tonight is staff and commissioner updates. Glenn?
We don't have anything except to note that there's a public hearing on February 25th.
Great. And I just want to give an update. I was at City Council last night representing us in our commission as one of the chairs that was invited to speak. It was just a really nice, we had a half hour. We met the new council members, and then we also had chairs and representatives from the Human Services Commission, the Library Board of Trustees, Parks, Trails, and Recreation Commission, and then also Planning Commission. And I gave a quick overview of our upcoming work. And there were questions to the four of us, so we were sitting sort of panel style. And questions that came to us. So Councilmember Parsi asked for a summary of whether and how Planning Commission includes environmental protections in the zoning code. So just gave a quick overview of that, which is hard because it's broad, but it's hopefully that can be a starting of conversation. Encouraged her to reach out if she had further questions. And then Councilmember Forsyth requested that we reach out to former design review board members for comment when we work on the architectural design standards, if staff doesn't do that already. So I just wanted to update everyone on that, and then also pass along like hearty thanks from everyone on the council for all of your hard work as volunteers. So thank you for everything you do. Are there any other commissioner updates? Commissioner Copley.
Okay, now I know it's the appropriate time to say that the requests for PFAS assessment would be something that we might want to suggest to the council. So I don't know if that's something where we discuss.
So how, Glenn, maybe you can help us. How would we get something like that on the agenda? Because I know that it's not.
So generally, I was just reviewing the email. This isn't really a comprehensive plan policy or a zoning code type change, which is Planning Commission's purview is to make recommendation on policy and code changes before it. So my understanding on this would be, it would really be more letters from individual planning commissioners as residents of Redmond. You could submit that to council with your concerns, or you could also go to council with your concerns during items from the audience. In terms of a collective letter from the Planning Commission, I would have to kind of clarify how that actually works.
Okay.
Because it's not a specific agenda item, so.
All right.
But we would have to, yeah, we just have to kind of talk about how that process would work and how it would be developed, because it would have to be in a public forum. Like, we couldn't do it offline. We would have to kind of
So
discuss
maybe
the
what
terms
I'll
of that.
do, just as chair, is I will work with staff to figure out if there is an appropriate venue for doing that. Otherwise, what we can do is, as Glenn stated, and I know a lot of us have done this for water advocacy issues specifically over the last 2 years, is we can continue to write our personal letters to council, and you're all welcome to go speak at council in their public comment period. So we'll see if we can pull together something group-wise, but otherwise, like in the meantime, that's an excellent option. Yes, Commissioner
Just a
Coleman.
clarifying question, which is sort of related to this, but just in general, if somebody in the community has something they want to kind of say like this, whatever the topic is, say somebody in our street has something that they want to write and other people in the street want to actually do the same thing, can you actually have one person write it and people actually then sign it? Is there some process where it's not just like, everybody has to write their own thing or basically copy and paste what someone else has done?
Well, in this case, because we have rules about what we can discuss offline, like as a group of us, it would be better to write it.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's fair. I understand that in this situation. It's
Just
different
to
from just being a resident, so to speak.
Absolutely. So just to keep on the right sides of transparency and public records in this group, I would prefer if people wrote individually.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense.
I see your point, but we'll do it that way. Commissioner Aparna.
Thank you, Chair. So I have two items. One is about water. Again, jumping on the bandwagon, but in a slightly different way. The Cascade Water Reliance report hasn't come out yet, so I request staff to see if they can give us a briefing whenever it comes out. I know we've discussed this before, but it's something that, given the PFAS and the wells protection, I think it's very germane that we at least get a briefing when the report is out. It's also worrying me because we had this discussion almost 2 years ago, and the water supply plan is contingent upon this report, which hasn't been released. So I'm just bringing that back to the forefront in front of the commission and request something to be done about it. I don't know what. And then the second one is, in the interest of full transparency, I just want to mention that I have joined the board of Together Center. And I'm fairly fresh at it. It's been in the last couple weeks. So I just wanted to kind of mention that, and also say that if there is interest from the commission to tour the center and visit with the organizations, it's something that I could try to put together, because they're all community-based organizations. So,
Well, congratulations. And Glenn, I see a response.
It actually wasn't a response to that. I just wanted to know I had one actually item before we adjourn.
All right. Well, then, Commissioner Barnett, congratulations and thanks for the update.
thank you.
And then Glenn Coyle.
Yeah, we just wanted to note that the Transportation Master Plan and related amendments to the transportation element was approved by Council, I believe, at the February 3rd meeting. So, and they also thanked you for your work on that.
Nice work, everyone. Thank you very much. Commissioner Copley.
Jumping on the bandwagon for transparency's sake, I'm also joining a board. It is the Manahale Foundation, which is an affordable housing developer and is brand new. So if you're familiar with SRM Development, some of the people that have been working at that firm for many, many, many years decided to start a new affordable housing development company. So disclosing that as well.
Congratulations on that one, too. All right. Thank you, everyone. Anything else? All right. Well, with that, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
All right. Then we are adjourned.